The desert appears silent, sun-bleached, lifeless. Cracks spread across the ground like scars, and the air shimmers with heat that has lasted not days, but years. Here, rain is not seasonal. It is a rare interruption. Yet beneath this hardened surface, life is not gone. It is waiting. Buried deep below the sand, frogs lie motionless inside earthen chambers, their bodies sealed in cocoons of shed skin. Their hearts beat slowly. Their metabolism drops to a whisper. Months pass, sometimes years. Nothing moves above them, but underground, survival is unfolding on a different clock. These frogs do not flee the desert. They do not chase water. They endure absence itself. This is not instinctive patience in the human sense. It is a refined biological strategy, shaped by millions of years of natural selection. An answer to a world that cannot be relied upon. Today we're diving into why desert frogs learn to wait into Earth's droughts, and how evolution has transformed delay, stillness, and restraint into one of the most powerful survival tools in extreme environments. What looks like inactivity is, in reality, precision timing written into flesh. The desert is not simply dry, it is unreliable. Rain does not arrive on schedule, nor does it fall evenly across the land. In many arid regions, years can pass without meaningful precipitation, followed by a single storm that floods the ground for only a few days. From an evolutionary perspective, this unpredictability is more dangerous than dryness itself. Life can adapt to scarcity. It struggles to adapt to uncertainty. Deserts like Central Australia, the Sonoran Desert of North America, and parts of Southern Africa receive highly variable rainfall driven by irregular atmospheric systems. A single downpour may create shallow pools that vanish within hours under extreme heat. Temperatures swing sharply between day and night, and the soil surface becomes hostile to exposed organisms. For animals living here, survival depends on either escaping these conditions or enduring them without relying on constant resources. Amphibians are, on the surface, poorly suited to such environments. Their skin is permeable, designed for gas exchange, but prone to rapid water loss. Their eggs typically require moisture. Their larvae often develop in standing water. For most frogs, proximity to ponds, streams, or wetlands is non-negotiable. In deserts, those features are temporary or absent altogether. Yet desert frogs exist, not as exceptions, but as specialists. Species such as the Australian water-holding frog, the African bullfrog, and the Couch's spadefoot toad inhabit regions where surface water is present for only a tiny fraction of the year. Their presence in these landscapes is not accidental. It is the result of sustained evolutionary pressure acting on populations that faced a simple choice: adapt to the absence of water, or disappear. Unlike mammals or birds, frogs cannot migrate long distances to track rainfall. Flight is not an option. Speed offers limited advantage. Instead, desert frogs evolved a different solution, one that redefines what survival looks like in an environment governed by long waits and brief opportunities. The soil itself becomes part of the ecosystem. Below the surface, temperature is more stable, and moisture lingers long after the surface dries. Burrowing behavior, already present in ancestral species, becomes essential. Over generations, frogs that could dig deeper, seal themselves more effectively, and tolerate extended inactivity gained a decisive advantage. Rain, when it comes, transforms the desert almost instantly. Dormant frogs emerge en masse, sometimes within minutes of the first drops hitting the ground. Temporary pools fill with sound as males call, mate, and lay eggs at extraordinary speed. Tadpoles grow rapidly, racing evaporation. The entire reproductive cycle is compressed into days. But these dramatic moments are rare. The majority of a desert frog's life is spent underground, unseen, waiting. This extreme imbalance, brief abundance followed by prolonged absence creates one of the harshest selective environments on Earth. It forces biology to answer a fundamental question: how do you survive when the environment offers nothing for most of your lifetime? For desert frogs, the answer is not resistance or escape. It is patience, encoded not as behavior alone, but as physiology, metabolism, and evolutionary design. Waiting, for a desert frog, is not a passive state. It is an active biological process known as aestivation, a form of dormancy triggered not by cold, like hibernation, but by heat and dehydration. This strategy allows frogs to survive conditions that would otherwise be fatal, by radically altering how their bodies function. When surface water disappears and humidity collapses, desert frogs retreat underground. Some burrow more than a meter below the surface, reaching soil layers where moisture persists and temperatures fluctuate less dramatically. Once sealed inside these chambers, a profound transformation begins. Metabolism slows dramatically. Heart rate drops. Oxygen consumption can fall to a small fraction of normal levels. In laboratory studies, estivating frogs show metabolic rates reduced by up to 80–90%. This slowdown minimizes energy use, allowing stored reserves to last for extraordinary lengths of time. In some documented cases, frogs remain dormant for several years without feeding. Water conservation becomes the central challenge. Amphibian skin, normally an asset for respiration, becomes a liability in dry environments. Desert-adapted frogs solve this problem in multiple ways. One of the most striking is cocoon formation. Species such as the Australian water-holding frog repeatedly shed layers of skin, which harden into a thick, protective casing around the body. This cocoon dramatically reduces evaporative water loss, turning permeable skin into a near-impermeable barrier. Internally, physiology shifts as well. Kidneys reduce urine production to near zero. Nitrogenous waste, which would normally be excreted, is converted into urea and retained in the body. While toxic at high levels for most animals, elevated urea concentrations in these frogs serve a secondary purpose. They help retain water by increasing internal osmotic pressure. This allows cells to hold onto moisture even as external conditions dry out. Muscle tissue, typically vulnerable during long periods of inactivity, is partially protected through biochemical adjustments that limit protein breakdown. Still, aestivation carries costs. Energy reserves slowly decline. Prolonged dormancy increases vulnerability to disease and reduces reproductive potential if conditions remain unfavorable for too long. Survival is not guaranteed, it is negotiated. Different species employ variations of the same core strategy. African bullfrogs excavate deep burrows and rely heavily on fat storage and urea accumulation. Spadefoot toads in North America use shallower burrows but enter aestivation more frequently, emerging rapidly after summer rains to breed in ephemeral pools. Despite these differences, the underlying principle is consistent: survival through controlled shutdown. What is remarkable is not simply that frogs can endure months without food or movement, but that their bodies are calibrated to wait for the precise biological signal that ends dormancy. Rising soil moisture, vibrations from rainfall, and subtle temperature shifts can trigger rapid reactivation. Within hours, organs resume full function. Metabolism accelerates. Behavior shifts from stillness to urgency. Aestivation is not suspension of life. It is life operating on a different timeline, one shaped by drought, unpredictability, and the relentless pressure to conserve until the moment arrives to act. In deserts, survival is not only about enduring drought, it is about responding correctly when drought ends, often without warning. Rain may arrive at night, fall for a few hours, and never return for months or years. For desert frogs, mistiming this brief window can mean complete reproductive failure. Emerging too early wastes energy. Emerging too late means missing the only chance to breed. Over evolutionary time, these frogs have become experts at reading subtle environmental signals that precede or accompany rainfall. Moisture penetrating the soil, drops in ground temperature, changes in barometric pressure, and even low-frequency vibrations caused by distant thunder can all act as triggers. These cues are not interpreted consciously, but physiologically. They activate hormonal cascades that pull the animal out of estivation with remarkable speed. In Australia's arid interior, the water-holding frog spends most of its life buried underground. When rain finally falls, it surfaces within hours. Males begin calling almost immediately, their vocal sacs inflating as if the drought had never occurred. Breeding takes place in shallow, temporary pools that may last only days. Eggs hatch rapidly, and tadpoles grow at accelerated rates, completing metamorphosis before the water evaporates. Every step of this process is compressed in time, shaped by the certainty that delay is fatal. A similar urgency is seen in North America's spadefoot toads. In deserts of the southwestern United States and northern Mexico, summer monsoon storms create ephemeral ponds that can disappear in less than a week. Spadefoot toads emerge en masse after heavy rainfall, sometimes traveling long distances across open desert to reach newly formed pools. Their tadpoles are among the fastest developing amphibian larvae known, capable of transforming into juveniles in as little as 10 days. In some species, timing goes even further. Certain spadefoot tadpoles can switch developmental pathways depending on food availability. If conditions are crowded or resources scarce, they develop into a carnivorous morph, feeding on other tadpoles to accelerate growth. This flexibility increases the odds that at least some individuals complete development before the pool dries. In Africa, the giant bullfrog follows a comparable strategy, but on a larger scale. After heavy rains, males excavate shallow basins near temporary water bodies. They guard eggs and tadpoles aggressively, sometimes digging channels to keep shrinking pools connected as evaporation accelerates. This parental investment is rare among frogs and reflects the high stakes of breeding in an environment where a single failed season can erase an entire generation. Feeding is equally time-sensitive. Desert frogs emerge severely energy-depleted after months or years underground. Insects and other invertebrates also surge after rainfall, creating brief explosions of prey availability. Frogs feed intensely, replenishing fat reserves that must last until the next unpredictable rain. What emerges from these patterns is not simple opportunism, but precision. Desert frogs are not reacting randomly to rain. They are synchronizing physiology, behavior, and development to an environment where success depends on acting at exactly the right moment and doing everything at once. In landscapes governed by chance, timing becomes biology itself. Waiting is powerful, but it is not without consequence. Aestivation allows desert frogs to survive prolonged drought, yet it carries inherent risks that shape the limits of this strategy. Evolution has refined patience into a biological tool, but it has not eliminated uncertainty. Every period of dormancy is a calculated gamble against time, energy, and environmental change. Energy reserves are finite. During aestivation, frogs rely almost entirely on stored fat and, in some species, limited protein reserves. Even with metabolism dramatically reduced, energy slowly drains away. If drought persists beyond what those reserves can sustain, death becomes unavoidable. Studies of estivating frogs show that prolonged dormancy can lead to muscle atrophy, suppressed immune function, and reduced reproductive capacity once activity resumes. Survival is prioritized over future success, and sometimes the trade-off is irreversible. False signals present another risk. Rain may fall briefly without creating viable breeding pools. Frogs that emerge in response to minimal rainfall may expend precious energy resurfacing, calling, and searching for water, only to find conditions unsuitable for reproduction. If no additional rain follows, they must burrow again, now with diminished reserves. Repeated false starts can be fatal, particularly for smaller species with limited energy storage. Even successful emergence does not guarantee success. Temporary pools can evaporate faster than expected. Eggs may desiccate. Tadpoles may perish mid-development if water levels drop too quickly. In some years, entire breeding events fail across large regions, leaving no new juveniles to replace aging adults. Desert frog populations often persist not because every breeding season succeeds, but because occasional successful years compensate for multiple failures. Climate variability adds further complexity. Desert environments have always been unpredictable, but recent shifts in climate patterns are altering rainfall timing, intensity, and distribution. Longer droughts, more intense but shorter storms, and rising soil temperatures can disrupt the delicate synchronization between frogs and rain. Aestivation evolved under historical patterns of variability. Rapid environmental change may push this strategy beyond its functional limits. There are also physiological ceilings to dormancy. Cells cannot indefinitely tolerate dehydration, elevated urea levels, or reduced circulation. While some frogs can survive years underground, others reach a threshold beyond which recovery is incomplete. Older individuals are particularly vulnerable. Evolution favors strategies that work often enough, not perfectly. Importantly, wading is not equally accessible to all amphibians. Desert frogs represent lineages that successfully crossed a narrow evolutionary bottleneck. Many others did not. The presence of these species today reflects survivorship, not inevitability. Aestivation is a solution forged under intense selection, but it is not a universal answer. These limits reveal an important truth about evolution in extreme environments. Adaptations do not eliminate risk, they redistribute it. Desert frogs survive drought by delaying life itself. But in doing so, they expose themselves to new vulnerabilities tied to time, chance, and change. Waiting works, until it doesn't. Beneath the desert surface, desert frogs persist at the edge of what life can tolerate. Their survival does not rely on strength, speed, or constant activity, but on a profound reshaping of biological time. Months of stillness are not a pause between meaningful moments, they are the dominant state of existence. Action, feeding, moving, reproducing becomes brief and rare, compressed into narrow windows when the environment briefly allows it. This inversion challenges how survival is often understood. In many organisms, success is measured by continuous growth and frequent reproduction. Desert frogs demonstrate an alternative logic. Here, endurance outweighs productivity. The ability to wait safely matters more than the ability to act quickly. Evolution has favored systems that protect cells, organs, and tissues during prolonged inactivity, revealing that life does not require constant motion to remain viable. These frogs also expose how finely tuned adaptation must be in extreme environments. Their physiology is calibrated to narrow margins, water retained just long enough, energy spent just slowly enough, emergence timed just closely enough to rainfall. There is little buffer for error. Survival depends not on dominating the environment, but on aligning precisely with its rare moments of generosity. Yet despite decades of research, much about these strategies remains unresolved. Scientists still debate the cellular mechanisms that allow organs to recover fully after years of reduced circulation. The long-term effects of repeated aestivation on aging, immunity, and genetic stability are only partially understood. Even the environmental cues that trigger emergence are not fully mapped. Rainfall is only part of a complex sensory landscape frogs must interpret correctly. As climate patterns shift, these unanswered questions gain urgency. Desert frogs evolved in systems defined by variability, but not by the speed or scale of current change. Whether aestivation can remain effective under altered rainfall regimes is uncertain. Some populations may adapt, others may not. Their future tests the limits of evolutionary flexibility itself. Beyond their ecological role, desert frogs serve as biological case studies in restraint. They show that survival can be achieved not by resisting harsh conditions, but by withdrawing from them, by allowing life to contract without extinguishing. This principle echoes across biology, from microbial spores to hibernating mammals. Yet desert frogs push it further than most, enduring not cold or scarcity alone, but prolonged absence. Ultimately, these animals remind us that life's boundaries are broader and more fragile than they appear. At the margins of habitability, existence becomes a balance between patience and collapse, precision and chance. Desert frogs survive not because the desert is forgiving, but because evolution has taught them when to act and when to wait.